Real quick, I have something incredibly fun to share with you. I'm currently running a special giveaway for listeners of the podcast, and the prizes are honestly kind of awesome. I'm giving away 3 free in-depth editorial reviews of first chapters. Yep, that's right, the most important chapter of your novel, the one that has to hook readers, agents, and editors. And on top of that, 5 additional writers will win free admission to any 2026 class I offer. Here's how to enter. All you need to do is leave a review for this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Once you've done that, scroll down to the show notes and click the link called Podcast Giveaway Entry Form. It's super quick and easy. The giveaway is open for 2 weeks, and I'll announce the winners right here on the podcast. So, if you want a chance at free editorial feedback or a free class spot, make sure to leave that review and then fill out the podcast giveaway entry form so I know whose name to put in the prize hat. Okay, back to the episode. The most important line in your novel is the first line. It decides whether a reader leans in and keeps reading or gets distracted, loses interest, and closes the book. And that, my friend, matters more than ever because readers live in a constant state of distraction, stress, overwhelm, endless notifications, and the relentless pull of the iPhone sitting there 3 inches from their hand. You have only a few seconds to convince them your story is worth pushing all of that aside. That's why today we're going to dive into the strategies you can use to turn your opening line into a true reader-hooking powerhouse. Hello and welcome to the Speculative Fiction Writing Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Heather Davis. I'm a book coach, developmental editor, founder of the World Shift Writing Summit, and fellow storyteller. And this is the show that's all about how to brainstorm, write, edit, publish, and sell a powerful speculative fiction novel, and maybe just change the world too. I'm going to admit something truly terrible. I absolutely judge a book by its opening line. Yep, that's right. If the first line doesn't grab me by the throat, as they say, I'm probably not going to read the rest of the novel. Why? Because I assume the author is showing me their chops right out of the gate. And if that first line doesn't interest me, I have absolutely no reason to believe the rest of the story will. Look, I know that might sound harsh, but I'm far from alone. Many readers use the opening line as a quick litmus test for whether or not the novel is worth their time. And even when a reader does push past a bland opening line, the author has already put themselves at a disadvantage. The reader isn't excited, they're cautious. So instead of letting your opening line feel about as thrilling as plain oatmeal, let's dive into a few simple strategies you can use to make it as metaphorically delicious as warm brownies topped with ice cream. Okay, let's start with what not to do. A lot of writers don't realize how incredibly important first lines are, so they take the pressure off and they just write something. And honestly, that's both good and bad. Let me explain. When you're drafting your novel for the first time, it is absolutely necessary to just begin. Write any old first line you want. The important thing at that stage isn't the words you choose, it's getting started. Because let's face it, the perfect first line for your novel almost never tumbles out fully formed from your head when you first sit down to write that first scene. Instead, the right opening line usually arrives much later, during the second, third, or maybe the 15th draft, once you already know the story, the character arcs, and the characters themselves so well that it feels like all of that information is carved into your bones. Then and only then do you circle back to the first line and really start workshopping it. But when you finally get around to polishing the opening line, there are some things you really, really want to avoid. These approaches don't create curiosity, and because of that, they won't pull readers in the way stronger openings can, which I'll share with you later in the episode. All right, so what not to do? Number 1, don't start with dialogue. Dialogue is often less intriguing than writers think. There are exceptions. Sometimes a character can deliver an absolute knockout line, but most dialogue openings feel exciting to the writer, not to the reader. The reader isn't grounded in the character or the situation yet, so they don't have enough context to care about what's being said, even if it feels unexpected. Number 2, don't start with stage directions. Stage directions sound like this. Demaya pushed through the front door and stomped up the stairs. At this point, the reader isn't invested enough in the character to care what they are physically doing. Movement alone does not create curiosity. Number 3, don't start with setting. This one surprises people. Setting can establish mood and atmosphere. We've all read books that pull it off beautifully, but it's incredibly hard to do this in a way that creates true narrative curiosity right out of the gate. Number 4, don't start with dry narration. Dry narration is prose that lacks emotionality and voice. There's no sense of inner processing, no intimacy with the POV character. It feels like the writer is simply reporting events. This is something many newer writers default to, but it doesn't belong in the first line, or honestly anywhere in the novel, but I digress. And if you start with dry narration, you don't just fail to build curiosity in the reader, you're probably doing the exact opposite. You are actively destroying curiosity. Okay, so now you know what not to do. Let's dive into the most important thing you need to be doing in your first lines, and that is creating curiosity. Your opening line should act like a curiosity spark. In other words, it should plant very specific questions in the reader's minds, questions they need to keep reading to have answered. Now, there's an important caveat here, because creating curiosity is not the same thing as confusing your reader. Meaning, this is not permission to be vague, abstract, or intentionally convoluted in the name of curiosity. Instead, you want a line that makes perfect sense on its own, but it delivers incomplete information. The reader understands what's being said and immediately realizes there's more they don't know yet. That gap, that tension between understanding and uncertainty, is where curiosity lives. But before we go any further, I want to say 2 things about all of the rules I'm going to tell you today about how to create curiosity. First, yes, established and wildly successful authors can get away with ignoring these rules. Stephen King can start a novel pretty much any way he wants because his name alone sells that book. But if you're not a New York Times bestseller, and statistically most of us aren't, you don't have that luxury. Your opening line has to earn the reader's attention. Second, while the opening line of your novel is absolutely the most important first line in your novel, these principles aren't just useful for the opening line of the novel. Applying this same curiosity-driven thinking to chapter openings throughout your book will dramatically strengthen your pacing and pull readers forward again and again. Now, let's go over some examples of curiosity-inducing first lines so you can see what I'm talking about. This one is from Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. Lydia is dead, but they don't know this yet. That is a powerful opening line. Notice how it does not create confusion. I absolutely understand what the author is saying. Lydia is dead, and they don't know it yet. But it does create questions. So many questions. First, who is Lydia? How did she die? Who are they? And why don't they know she's dead yet? I'm going to keep reading. In fact, I did keep reading this novel simply because of that first line. And funny little story, I read an article where Celeste Ng said that I think it took her 5 or 6 years to write this novel, and that line came right at the end before she sent it to agents. So it wasn't like that powerful opening line occurred to her before she ever wrote this book. It was something that she tacked on right at the end, and wow, did it do its job. All right, the second opening line that I want to talk about right now is from The Martian by Andy Weir. I'm pretty much fucked. Okay, as far as opening lines go, that one is pretty simple and direct, and it's incredibly powerful. Because as a reader, I'm not at all confused. I totally understand being in a situation where you feel like you're pretty much done for. But it does cause me to ask some really great questions like, Well, what situation is this? Why does this character feel like they're done for in this situation? Now that you understand the idea of making that first line a curiosity spark, let's dig into the 3 most common categories of opening lines that you can choose from. Number 1, the protagonist's current situation. Number 2, a bold statement. Number 3, foreshadowing. Let's start with the protagonist's current situation. This simply means that the first line gives us rich information about the situation the protagonist finds themselves in, but in a way that's dripping with emotionality and interiority. In other words, it is not dry narration. This is probably the most popular type of killer first line. Our first example is from The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. A girl is running for her life. Again, this opening line is not at all confusing, but it immediately sparks some compelling questions. Who is the girl? Why is she running for her life? Who or what is she running from? Our second example is from 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Joost had 2 problems, the moon and his mustache. Here, we instantly understand Joost's situation, but we're also left with very specific, irresistible questions. For instance, who is Joost? Why are the moon and his mustache problems? And what exactly are they causing him trouble doing? Because honestly, those seem like 2 silly things to be causing him trouble. Like, why would the moon and his mustache be causing him trouble doing something? I don't know, but I really did want to read on to find out. All right, let's move on to the next one. Your first line can be a bold statement. A bold statement is exactly what it sounds like. It's a line that carries weight and makes the reader immediately sit up and think, I need to know more about this. Often, these are what I like to call how the world works statements. They're not about the character's immediate situation. Instead, they're more about the world or about the character in a more conceptual, thematic way. Let's look at a couple of examples. The first one is from the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? What an opening line, right? I mean, after all, we're starting with the end of the world, for goodness sake. But even though we're starting with the end of the world, I'm not confused about what is being said. I just have some questions. For instance, why are we starting with the end of the world? That seems like what should come at the end of the book, not maybe at the beginning. So why are we starting here? And also, what's ending the world and why? Let's do another one. This one's from Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. The trees were full of crows and the woods were full of madmen. I love this opening line because it creates such a strong mood and carries real emotional weight. My questions here are very specific. Why are we in the woods? Are the crows important? Why exactly are the woods full of madmen? And do those madmen pose danger to someone or something? Let's dive into the last one, number 3, foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is, of course, when the author teases the reader with something significant that will happen later in the novel. This technique is often used when a story begins in a quieter or slower place, and the writer wants to subtly promise the reader that something major is coming. When done well, foreshadowing can make even calm, mundane scenes feel charged because we know what they're building towards, even if it's happening at a much later time in the story. Our first example is from The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. 19 years before she decided to die, Nora Seed sat in the warmth of the small library at Hazleton School in the town of Bedford. Let's think about this for a moment. If the writer had simply written, Nora Seed sat in the warmth of the small library at Hazleton School in the town of Bedford, that would have been sort of pure stage direction, and it would have fallen flat. Because who cares that Nora Seed is sitting in a library? I certainly wouldn't. But by adding that dependent clause, the entire line becomes electric. Now we know that we're building towards something devastating. Nora Seed deciding for some reason to die. So my questions become, why does she decide to die? And maybe does it have something to do with this exact moment that she's pushing a set of dominoes over? So yeah, I'm really curious to read this whole book to know the answer to that question. Our final example is from Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. The night I watch Athena Liu die, we are celebrating her TV deal with Netflix. What a wonderful opening line, right? This one is actually a blend of the protagonist's current situation and foreshadowing. And because of that, it is incredibly, maybe doubly enticing, right? Because we know the current situation is that this I person, this protagonist, is celebrating with Athena Liu. And we know there's this Netflix deal, so that's the current situation. But the foreshadowing part is the night I watch Athena Liu die. So now we know that whatever happens this night, we're going to get to watch it. But we know at the end of this night, Athena Liu is going to die, and we want to read to find out why. So, of course, the main question is, what kills Athena Liu, right? Why does she die? Is it murder? Is it an accident? What could have done it? Okay, my friends, that's it for today. But don't stop the podcast yet. I have some things to tell you. If you're not on my email list yet, you are absolutely missing out, because that's where I share free classes, surprise writing sprints, and all the good writing stuff I don't post anywhere else. So go click the link in the show notes and get yourself on my list and come grab the goodies when I offer them. You're going to love being on my list, I promise you. Also, since you're right here, make sure you're following the podcast so that these episodes show up right in your feed and you don't ever miss any. Until next time, keep writing, keep dreaming, and remember, the world needs your stories right now. So don't you dare give up on your novel or yourself. Talk soon.